my son said I should make a shirt with all of the colors. So I did. Here it is. However, at first I didn't, because I told him you're crazy, because he is. But also he's crazy because too many colors that don't go together are going to create an ugly brown that you're not going to want on a tie-dye shirt. And I explained that to him, and he just looked at me and said, "Dad, that makes total sense. That's okay." I teased. He didn't say that. Of course not. He's a 9-year-old. He said, "You should do it anyways," with a little smirk and smile on his face. Anyways, I parked the idea until I had an opportunity to make some shirts for some family friends, where I said, let's give this one a shot. Let's use the rainbow, the spectrum, and a spiral. We'll figure it out to try and keep the colors that play nice with each other next to each other. I did 3 rounds, and yeah, one of them didn't turn out well in terms of a shirt. I did multiple shirts, and the second round, one shirt I consider a total failure, even though my cousin, she said she'd take it, but we learned from our mistakes, and that's what we're going to do. I'm going to show it to you. In the last round, you want to stay tuned for that one, because the last round I figured out a really nice die placement strategy for the center of the shirt that I can't wait to share with you, and it really helps create a really nice center of the shirt that looks really good. Let's get into it. Me again, real quick, before we get into the details of what we're doing, I just want to reiterate the importance of the prep work when it comes to tie-dyeing with Procyon dyes. I'm using Dharma today, so that prep work is critical. I'm going to put it on the screen. As we're really focused on the dye application and the changes from one round to the next, I'm not going to focus so much on the prep work and the washing, even though those are critical steps. If this is your first time tie-dyeing and watching a video like this, make sure to pause the video and take a look at the steps. They're not hard, they just take a little bit of time. Additionally, since this video is about the dye and the application and all the details around that, I'm not going to spend time talking about how I tied the shirts. And this dye application, you can apply it to any method you choose when it comes to spiraling your shirt. If you want to spend 60 minutes doing so, feel free to do so. If you want to take super fast 5 seconds, you could do that as well. It'll work the same. This idea of all the colors sat unused for a while till I had a project to make some shirts for some family friends of ours. And who better to provide an experimental shirt on than friends? Now, as I was mulling this idea over, the idea hit me. Okay, so we know clashing colors make brown in tie-dye world. So then colors that are next to each other on the color spectrum should complement each other and avoid that dreaded brown sludge. So what if I did a spiral that goes from one end of the spectrum all the way to the other, with all of them meeting in the middle? Yes, my initial thought, I was worried about the middle, because I know what if all the colors come together in the middle and make that dreaded brown. However, as with any good science experiment, it's best to start out with a baseline, look at the results and go from there. So that's what we're going to do. Next, let's talk dye amounts and application for round 1. I know math is not everyone's favorite subject, so let's keep this simple and use an example to explain what I did. I started by weighing my dry shirt and selecting a total percentage dye by weight of 4.75, as that number has worked well for me in the past. To make the math easy, let's say the shirt weighed 100 grams. So 100 times 4.75 would give me 4.75, which means my total dye to use for this shirt is 4.75 grams. Now, definitely you're gonna have to weigh your shirt, multiply it by the 4.75% to get the total dye for your project. With me so far? I'm sure you got this. Tip, use a calculator. I do that every time. So now next question is how many colors and how to apply them to this spiral. I decided to go with 8 colors, with each one getting 2 opposite spirals. So as such, when the shirt is tied into a disc and evenly divided, we're gonna have 16 pizza slices because we're gonna have the pattern mirrored opposite each other. So now what colors to use? Well, I started on one end of the spectrum based on color wavelength and worked my way to the other. And I decided to use black as the edge. So really I only used 7 colors to cover the spectrum. Now, as this is round 1 and to establish a baseline, each dye will get the same amount of dye, except as instructed by Dharma, because, for them, they have certain requirements to get the color depth, which I have off to the right as an adjustment. Now, you'll notice I only used double the amount for the black, even though Dharma recommends having 4 times the amount. But let's face it, I was scared of too much black dye, and that might overpower all the other colors. Now, of course, and when I'm applying the dye on the very first color, I screwed up and I didn't place the black in the exact opposite pizza slice. That's what happens when you have 16 slices, and I didn't realize it until it was too late. Now, I found out when I was applying the red, which was on the other end of the spectrum. So red is only on half of the spiral. The other thing to note here is each dye was applied a hair short of the center, trying to give it a little space in the middle. So after the standard ice, a little soda ash, and some waiting and washing, drying, and ironing, here's how the shirts turned out. Now, before we get into it, I did put the washing steps on the screen as they are also important. Feel free to pause. All right, on to the reveal. I like to put up the wet reveal because that's the initial look on the left, and then the washed and ironed on the right. And it's fun to see how the colors compare and how they lighten up. Some colors stay the same, even wet. And this shirt, I really like it. I really like how the gradients came out. But when I think about what I was going for as a spectrum, this isn't it. That red is awesome, but it's overpowering. The turquoise, where is it? It's barely even there. And the center, it's not awful. It's not the best, but it's not awful. It's just not as colorful as I wanted. And this is the fun part about doing tie-dye is you might be going for something and you might achieve something different. But now we have to think, well, what can we do to get to where we want to go? I was going to leave this design for later. However, my cousin reached out and asked me to make them a couple shirts based on this design. They wanted to be my first Etsy clients as well, but as this design wasn't finished, I wasn't ready to sell it, so we had to talk. So I consulted with my new favorite clients, and we came up with some ideas, and I also had to do some thinking, especially as I did not want to muck this up. All right, so let's get into round 2. Now for round 2, I kept the dye by weight at 4.75% and kept the same 8 slices. However, this time I bumped the number of colors from 8 to 11. I thought about doing 10, but then I realized if I did 11, I could say, but these go to 11. Terrible, Nathan. A little Spinal Tap reference for you there. Wow. Anyways, I decided to try a new approach and use 2 colors per slice for a couple of them, for the purple, for the yellow, and the red sections, which is why you see the 16th, which is terrible. Don't do that. This was not a good idea. Hindsight's 2020. You know, my thought here was the idea was more colors would create more gradients and a better spectrum. And I also bumped the actual dye percentage for some specific colors while keeping others the same, as you can see on the screen. Now, another thing I tried, which I should not have done, because in experiments, you don't want to add too many changes from one to the other. So this other thing I did is I tried adding a thin cotton cloth over the shirts to avoid spotting, which I've seen other people do in videos with great success. And looking back, it didn't work for me here, and I'll probably skip it next time unless I'm doing some very specific experiment around using a cotton cloth. So I'm not going to do that again. Anyways, let's fast forward to the wet reveal. This first one for my Tallboy Spence was much darker in the middle. However, the more I looked at the shirt, the more I loved this one. That center has some great color interactions, and as this is an extra large tall, that extra space lets that dye expand and brighten up dramatically near the edges, giving that shirt an extra dimension. It's very trippy. You know, who would have thought a tie-dye shirt would be this trippy? Additionally, with Fall on the Air, the shirt, it just feels very autumny to me, which I really liked. All right, let's look at the second shirt. This one for my cousin Amber. I mean, I'm speechless here, right? The shirt, just look at it. It's awful. Like that wet reveal, there's nothing in the center. I'm like, and then you look at the dry shirt, it's still terrible. Now, let's give credit to where credit is due. That outside bottom of the shirt, though, that's money. That looks amazing. Too bad the rest of the shirt is utter trash. And Amber, being just the super sweet and nice person she is, She said she'd take it as is. However, no. I said, no, I'm going to make you another shirt. This is unacceptable. You wanted something brighter, and it doesn't meet my own expectations. So I had to really think about how to fix this spectrum. Hey, I just want to take a moment for saying thank you for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it and you find it helpful, or it's interesting and you'd like to see more, please like it and subscribe. It would mean a lot to me, and I love making these videos, and I can't wait to share more with you. All right, back to the video. All right, round 3. It's all about the real estate, baby. Location, location, location. Now, I decided to look at this 2 ways. First, how much real estate do the colors actually take up on the spectrum? If I'm trying to mimic the spectrum, let's actually think about that. Then, how do I represent that on the shirt? Second, I need a better way to apply the dye to avoid those muddy centers. So let's look at the spectrum again with the mindset that I just mentioned of how much real estate the actual specific colors take up on it. And I probably should have started here, Nathan Dum-Dum, but it's okay, better late than never. Let's also try to simplify the dye application. Instead of 8 pizza slices, let's simplify it and do 4 on each side, right? I like to do opposite ones, so we're gonna do 2 opposite spirals. So on one side, there's gonna be 4 slices. Let's simplify it. Now, thinking with the spectrum in mind, with 4 slices, what should that first slice, that first quadrant look like? Well, let's look at the actual spectrum. That first quarter, if we narrow it down, goes from red to yellow. So that has to be the goal for that quadrant on the shirt. So let's do the rest. For the second quadrant of the shirt, for the second quadrant of the spectrum, it goes from yellow to green, and then so forth, from green to blue. And then with the last one, blue to purple. So with this revolutionary idea, it's okay, better late than never, Nathan, let's think about what the dyes need to be and then how to apply them on the shirt. So let's look at my chart. I have the 11 colors, and you can see how some colors take up way more real estate than I originally gave them, such as blue and green. Now I decided in each quadrant, I'm going to use 3 colors to provide that gradient. So I started with the ratio of 1/12 as, well, 4 quadrants with 3 colors in each one is 12, so take the total dye divided by 12. Now black, the special color it is, will have limited real estate, not near the center. And as I didn't want to divide by 13, I just left the total at 12. Keep my math easy. Okay, so now with our hypothesis of the gradient figured out, let's get to our second goal, no muddy center. So in doing this, I started by reducing the overall dye percentage starting point to 4.5%. Not a big change, but a little adjustment down. Now, I saw this tip on the internet, and I said I wanted to try it. So we know sending all the colors to the center leads to misery, which I even told my son before I started this. That was like a forewarning. So the tip I read was don't take all of them, only some of them to the center. So now, with that in mind, each section, each quadrant has 3 colors. What if I only sent 1 in each quadrant to the center? And the other 2 will stop short, leaving white shirt space, allowing the colors to wick and blend naturally. Well, this is my hypothesis. So there's only one way to figure out if all of this will work, and that is to do this. I'm going to do it for 2 shirts. Now, additionally, that black dye, it was only given a silver lining, it was given a sliver in the red, between the red and hydrangea areas, and only goes about 2/3 of the way to the center to really try and avoid it spreading to the center. Well, let's take a look at the wet reveal. I was instantly in love with this, and just from the wet reveal writing Cloud9, I knew it was an instant success. Even wet, these shirts are clearly bright, well defined in the center, and they feel that there's way more colors of the spectrum. And when we look at the dried shirt, we see it. The black is there to provide that border, and it doesn't over muddy the center. The center is bright. The whole shirt is bright with clearly defined borders. I have no real complaints. Amber and Spence, I hope you like your shirts. I made one for myself so that we can twinsies it up when I visit you again. Thank you all for watching.